All right, welcome back to part 2 of this Rose Petal wine. I just got done bottling it. I'm going to show you how we finished it. We modified a little things to test a few things out, so you don't want to miss that. And you definitely don't want to miss the end where we're going to try this. This is the Rose Petal wine. We won first place. Let's just get right into part 2 and make sure you're subscribing to this channel. There's so much more coming down the line.
'Cause all that I want is for you to be happy. Give me a chance to show that you can be. Well, open your eyes and see the way I see. 'Cause all that I want is...
All right, welcome back to part 2 of this wine. This is that Rose Petal wine that we're making out of fresh roses if you got them, but we're using the dry. Again, linked in the description, but it is time to get this start this refining of this. Remember, we're trying to make this wine in 30 days. How do you know when your fermentation done? You want to get a specific gravity of 1.0. That's your goal. Remember when we started with a potential alcohol, I think we got this to around 12%, 13%. So if you get it to a 1.0 specific gravity, your ABV is 12 to 13%. Let's just stop the rambling and see if we're there. All right, we got our sanitized hydrometer here, and let's just drop that in. Oh, I'm gonna need more wine, but I can tell you, it looks like it's done. And you can see it's exactly 1.0. I'll get you a close-up, but it's time to get to the next step. Now remember, all along this way, we've sanitized everything, and we're getting ready to rack into this carboy, this wine. So you gotta sanitize your carboys too. Let's get to racking. Now remember, we're trying to do this wine in 30 days because I'm trying to get it enter into the contest if I can get it done. But now's the time we want to add some bentonite to speed up this process. I've got a half a cup of water or 125 milliliters. And we're gonna add to this 2 teaspoons of our bentonite powder. And this is sufficient if you're doing a 5-gallon batch. We're only doing 3. I'm still gonna use the recommended amount, sufficient for up to 5 gallon. And now all we're gonna do is get this mixed into our warm water until it becomes like a slurry. And then we're gonna put it in the bottom of our sanitized carboy and rack our wine on top of that. That's what we want today. So there, I hope you can see the bentonite, but it's kind of like a milkshake consistency. That's what we want. I got my sanitized carboy. All we're gonna do is pour this in to the bottom, because as we add wine, we want this to get mixed in a little bit. So now let's get this lid off. I got my carboy with that bentonite at the bottom. I got our racking cane here that's sanitized. And all we're gonna do is sit this down in our bucket and get the other end down to our carboy. And do not stir this prior to racking, because there's gonna be some dead yeast at the bottom we wanna get out. As this goes down, we're gonna lift all those rose petals. You smell the flowers like crazy. You're still smelling some of that dead yeast too. But when we get that yeast out, it's gonna be amazing. You can see I got my bucket tipped. I'm just gonna raise this up to drip our rose petals just like this, and just continue to let it go down. We're gonna need probably every bit of this. So that's why I'm tilting the bucket to get as much of this wine out here as possible. And there we go. When you see that siphon start to bubble, it's done. It's a perfect amount. I'm gonna get it up here and show you. Look, that's all that's left with the rose petals. One thing I want to tell you, do not squeeze your bag. You're just gonna get unnecessary pulp in there. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to show you there, but do you see some of the dead yeast? That bentonite will take the rest out, and this will become perfection. Look at this rose petal wine. Is that a beautiful rose color or what? Now, you can see I got this airlock on here pretty quick because we want to keep oxygen out at this point. From here on out, oxygen can be your enemy, or you could turn this into vinegar. Now what we want to do, you can see, it's almost perfect. The perfect 3-gallon recipe. We got to get a paddle in here to be able to stir it, but I'm just going to add a little bit of water because this is not much. Just to bring it up to about where that curve is without making sure I can get that paddle in and it doesn't overflow, because I've done that many times. I'll stop right there, and if I need to add a little bit later, I will. All right, now what we want to do is get this airlock removed so we can stir this. Now remember to do this close to a sink because I've had mishaps on this step. Watch the video where I broke one of these carboys stirring it. And I still think it was a cheap carboy, but you just never know. So there we go, we're stirring it. Now a lot of people say, do you degas your wine? You'll see bubbles come up here, and while I stir this for the next couple days, it's like degassing your wine. So yes, in a way I'm doing it. It's just not necessary to go out of your way sometimes to do it. So that's it, we got it, the bentonite stirred in, the refining is starting to happen. What is that bentonite doing? It's charging the particles inside here, positive and negative, and it's gonna pull those particles down to the bottom. That's it, I'm gonna stir this for 3 to 5 days. I'm not gonna bore you with that. We'll come back in about 7 days and we'll see where it's at. And if it's clear enough, we're gonna get on that liquor quick. Now also in this stage, make sure you're putting this in a dark place. I'm not gonna put it right behind me here. I'm gonna put it in a tub again because of any mishap possibilities. And then I'm just gonna cover this up with a towel. I decided to show you what day 2 looks like when we stir this bentonite and charge it up again. So that's what we're doing. This will be day 2. And then we'll do one more day of stirring tomorrow to get these particles charged. Man, if you could smell this rose wine, get the airlock back on, and we'll do it one more time. And let's fast forward to this a week from now. All right, it's racking day. I need to get this liquor quick, or whatever it is in there. Do you see how clear it is after the bentonite? It's a very dark wine. You can barely see through this. All right, we're back. It's been about 14 days since I put that bentonite. I just didn't get a time to do it. It's time to add this. Super clear. This is what's gonna finish this up to make this a 30-day wine, because I'm trying to get this entered into a contest. Let's get this racked into a new carboy. We'll add this and get it super clear. Now, I tell many of you a lot of times that don't rush winemaking. You remember I put that bentonite right after the primary into this secondary because I'm trying to get it done in 30 days. Normally I say, don't rush it. Do a racking or 2 before you put the bentonite, and then if it's still not, you can hit it with the liquor quick or super clear. Now, it's been killing me for 14 days because I gotta smell this rose petal wine. It smells like roses. All right, now it's time to get this airlock off and get it down in my sanitized carboy down below here. You see me do this many times, and we want to stay away from this bentonite down below. Now, one thing, make sure when you're doing this, you're keeping that hose down in your carboy down below the wine. You don't want to get oxygen in there. As that's going down, it's forcing that oxygen out. Now, as we get close to the bottom, you're going to see me, I'm slowly tilting this. You don't want to get any of that bentonite or those fine particles in this point. If you waste a little, that's okay. And when you start to see that bentonite slide, stop. There we go, that's it. All right, so there you can see that gunk. That's the bentonite, your fine particles, rose petals, everything down in there. I hope you can see the color of this rose petal wine. It might be one of the most beautiful colored wines I've ever made on this channel. And this super clear, buy Liquor Quick. I got links to the description, but this is the star today. Now this super clear is a 2-part series. I cut them in half here. We've got the Casilosol, the smaller pack, and this is the Cheeto sand. That's what we're gonna finish it up with. So I got the smaller pack, the Casilosol. We're just gonna open this up and get the airlock. We wanna add it in here. And then it says to stir this in vigorously. And there it goes. And I'll get my sanitized spoon and stir this in vigorously. I'm also gonna top this off with just water because it's not much. I have a whole video on this being the most common wine problem. What do you do when you got head space in here? Remember, we don't want much head space. I'm just gonna add some here until it starts to come up to this bend a little bit. So I'm gonna put a little bit more there. And that's pretty good because remember, we're hoping to bottle this in 48 hours. I got my paddle. We're gonna sanitize the paddle and wait a couple seconds before we put this in there. Remember, everything you're doing, you wanna sanitize. And it just says to gently stir this Casilosol in a little bit. And then it says to come back in 12 to 48 hours and add the Cheeto sand. So that's what we're gonna do. And sanitize your airlock and get it on here right away. All right, it's been 2 hours. Now it's time to get our Cheeto sand in. We got our 1 ounce of water here. Follow the directions. And it's 1 ounce warm water. And we're gonna add this and stir this in a little bit before we add it to our wine. So there we go, that's all we need. All right, we can get the airlock off. Now, what the directions say is you add this very slowly over about a minute period. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'll fast forward here. But this is when the magic begins. Now, once we add this, there is no need to stir this at this point. You just let it go. We'll put the airlock back on, and it says it will clear within 12 to 48 hours. I hope it does because I got like 4 days to get this to a wine tasting contest. I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And there we go. Get every last drop. All right, let's get that sanitized airlock back on. Today is bottling day for our Rose Petal wine. I can't wait to finish this up and I can't wait to taste it. We made this in 30 days. Let's just get it racked and show you the finishing steps of this. Now, I'm gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna dissolve my additives ahead of time in just a little bit of wine to make sure it's all getting incorporated. Usually I'll add them to the bottom of a bucket and rack on top, but I want to give it an extra hour in this wine and see if it makes a difference. Now, in the bottling process, we're going to only need 2 additives. You want potassium sorbate, which is stabilizer, which is going to help prevent that yeast from kicking up, and Camden tablets for sanitation. So I took that cup and I divided it into 2, and I want to add my stabilizer in one and crush the Camden tablets in the other. So the stabilizer, we need a ½ a teaspoon per gallon, 3-gallon batch. I'm putting 3 of these in here. And the reason I'm doing it is try and get this dissolved maybe an hour or so ahead before I actually bottle this and see if it clears up a little better. My spoons here, we're just gonna crush up 3 Camden tablets. I'm not putting these into the same cup because I don't want them to react with each other. So here we go. 3 of these in here. And there we go. I'm gonna stir these, get them a little boost. Now, since we're back sweetening this, we gotta get sugar. I like to measure out and dissolve a simple syrup with 1 cup of sugar per gallon of wine. There we go. We're gonna add the exact same amount of water. 3 cups. And there's some water. And we'll get this on the stove and just get this dissolved and clear. That's what we want. And there, we got it on the stove. And we're just gonna stir this, making sure we don't burn it. We wanna bring it to almost a boil and then shut off the heat. We wanna get this very clear because again, we're adding this to wine and we want our wine to be clear. So there you go. You can kind of see along the edge, it's just starting to get to that boiling point and it's crystal clear. We're not scraping any sugar or any of that. So all you want to do is shut your heat off and let this cool to room temperature before we add it to our wine. Now, before we get this wine racked into a bucket so we can back sweeten it, we need to sanitize some bottles and our equipment and our corks. So let's just get started and get these bottles. We want 5 bottles for every gallon of wine. So 3-gallon batch, I need at least 15 bottles. And don't forget the corks. Remember, we're sanitizing these for 2 reasons. Number 1 is to help with bacteria control. And number 2, it's gonna be a lot easier to put these in your bottles. Now, I know I say this every time I make wine, but I love this wine drying rack. If you're making a lot of wine, I'd get one of these, linked in the description. All right, it's time to get our wine racked in the bucket. Before we start, do you remember the stabilizer, the Camden tablets, and the potassium sorbate we mixed in? What we're gonna do is add them to our bucket, and we're gonna rack the wine right on top of this. This pre-mixing is just to get that dissolving a little bit of a head start. All right, sanitized racking cane. Let's get this airlock off. We're done with that. And we're racking this right into our additives. Now, one thing I'm gonna do is there's a lot of sediment that super clear got out at the bottom. I'm very impressed with every time I use that thing. I'll get you a close up here when we get close to the bottom, but there is probably about 1 inch of sediment. Stay away from that. What I'm gonna do, because this is our final racking, this is going to be our finished wine. We're going to tilt this a little bit and until that stuff starts to slide. Don't get any of that in your finished product. That is key at this point. I'll tell you one thing, it smells like roses. All right, that's it. You can see we wasted a little bit, but I'm okay with that because I don't want any of that stuff in my finished product. Now the fun begins. This is where we're gonna taste it and get it to the flavor we want, that sweetness we want. Remember, I put them additives in here. I'm just gonna give it a slight stir at this point, and we're gonna add our sweetener a little bit at a time. There's my cooled off liquid. I'm just gonna put about half of this in and stir it and taste it. I don't want this rose petal wine to be real sweet. I'm leaning to just a very slight sweetness. I got a sanitized straw. Remember, always use this. And I'm just gonna take it up and put it in a shot glass like this and just taste it a little bit. That's almost perfect. I think that's it. I'm stopping because I don't want it too sweet. Man, you smell the roses, you taste the rose petals. It's perfection. Next step is we're ready to put this in bottles. I got all my bottles put in a container, make sure, just in case of any mishaps. I always like to put a container under the bottles. So we're just gonna fill these up and then we're gonna get our corker out. My professional corker. If you're gonna stay in this hobby, get one of these. I got links to it in the description. So now you just did this labor of love making this wine for this, in this case, 30 days. And now it's always the best time is the time to taste it. There it is, the rose petal wine. I don't know if you can see the color in this, but it's more of like a pale red color. And do you remember, I had that extra in that carboy. I hated to waste it. So what I did is I just poured the rest in a glass and it will settle out. I tried to just skim it off the top, but we ain't gonna waste that either. Remember what our goal was. We wanted to smell the roses and we wanted to taste them in a very unique wine. And I can honestly say the roses is over the top on this thing. When you open one of these bottles after 3 to 6 months, which is when I think you should be drinking it, you are gonna smell a bouquet of roses. No doubt about it. And you even taste the roses. I don't know how you describe this, but this has got to be on your list of wines to make. It was very cheap to do. Your friends will be amazed at this one. And don't miss that next wine video because it's gonna be fantastic. It begins with a B, but that's all I'm gonna tell you. Until next time, have a great day.
'Cause all that I want is for you to be happy. Give me a chance to show that you can be. Well,